Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to Malhama and the Mahdi. In this episode of Mushroom Cloud Malhama, we need to discuss the current situation, the current scenario. So all our lives, we've been led to believe that nuclear weapons are going to play a major factor in the apocalypse of humanity, whether it is called Armageddon or the Malhama, the Great Slaughter. I was raised with this. I'm in my 40s, and since I was a very young boy, I was raised at the end of the Soviet era. And so there was always potentially going to be an exchange of missiles between North America and Eurasia, between America and Russia, the leader of the Soviet Union at that time. What I want to suggest to you is that we've got some questions about nuclear weapons and nuclear energy. Of course, like people live at Hiroshima and Nagasaki. People go on vacations to visit Chernobyl. People have been living and fishing in areas all around Fukushima for years and taking food out of the Pacific Ocean where the ocean currents go past Fukushima. So not everything matches up, but let's bracket off the degree of reality related to the nuclear factor, to the atomic factor. Something is going on. People do, in fact, get sick when they are near testing sites and they are working in that industry or around it in some capacity. So let's bracket that off to the side. Let's address the issue. I have been suggesting for a while that the Malhama might not be what we have been led to believe, that it might be something else. It's very serious. I take that very literally, but I expand my literalism as I expand the data sets that I'm studying and seek the best possible toolkit to sift through the data and analyze it in a systematic manner so that I can properly synthesize the information and share, to simplify it and to share in a practical, pragmatic way to be of the greatest benefit possible so that as many of us can awaken and ready ourselves as possible to be prepared for what's to come. So, check out this perspective. It might shock you if I were to say that we have been in the Malhama since at least World War II. Brother, what are you talking about? That's crazy. That's nothing like what the scholars say. All right, so let's think about this for a second. Nuclear weapons were being developed and tested since World War II at least. Some of the groundwork was laid in the days before that. We know that some of the first tests take place at White Sands area in New Mexico, the same area where Roswell is and the UFOs later after World War II. So these are testing grounds, the Trinity site. And we know that at Columbia University and thereabouts, they were engaged in the Manhattan Project and doing various lab condition experiments in the buildings on that campus and around. And then the atomic bombs are used at Hiroshima and Nagasaki, both of which are inhabited cities to this day, heavily visited. People drink the water and eat the food from these locations. People go on vacations in and around those areas to this very day. Many experiments were done after World War II, with the United States being the dominant nation, but the Soviet Union and the various Soviet republics are engaged in the testing and development of nuclear weapons and the storage of the weapons and of the waste products and the various products needed for creating nuclear energy for power plants. And we know in the days following, we have France, the United Kingdom, we've got South Africa, we've got Israel, we've got Pakistan, we've got India. We have now North Korea and Iran, supposedly. Earlier on, we had Iraq, supposedly, all developing nuclear weapons, nuclear capacity. We also know that many nations have nuclear energy. They have power plants, and therefore they have the capacity to weaponize materials for dirty bombs, for depleted uranium, which can be used to paint bunker busters and tank busting shells, and have caused all kinds of problems supposedly to American troops, veterans, to Iraqi veterans, to the people of Kuwait and Iraq, I believe Iran, wherever the dust from these materials could blow through the air and in the water into the surrounding areas. So the whole point is that we have a number of nations that have been utilizing nuclear or atomic materials since at least World War II. So here's what I wanted to suggest to you. We have been led to believe that nuclear war and atomic war, however you want to term it, is something that is isolated, and it's a very dangerous possibility. They have been using fear as a weapon of war since World War II to get us to be scared of these weapons. But many people have protested intensively against the use of nuclear energy and power plants for a long time. Because, so for instance, if there are nuclear power plants in a nation, say there is a war, it is very distinctly possible that nations could target nuclear energy power plants, sites, or places where waste has been deposited. We also know that anthropologists and linguists have been called upon over the years to develop signs and symbols to paint and lay all over and to carve into stone at nuclear waste sites, so that in the event that modern humanity is wiped out and some humans do survive in pockets, and then maybe a few thousand years later, after the half-life is worn off and all of the negative effects, the health effects of the atomic energy of the waste products have depleted over time and disintegrated, that then if they go near one of these sites, that they see these symbols of death, the skulls, the crossbones, and symbols that would scare them away, that would ward them away, so they wouldn't think that, oh, these are caches of weapons or food or treasures. They wouldn't think they're treasure houses, and they would withdraw. Now, of course, having sites like this and symbols like that, these also make for excellent hiding places for people, for countries, for militaries. They could say, that could scare people away. That, oh, you know, it's like this, I don't want to get cancer. I don't want to pass cancer on to my wife while, you know, in intimacy through radiated seed. If I happen to have been exposed to these toxic materials. So what I would argue is that now let's expand this view. Let's expand this literalism of nuclear waste and weapons having not only a direct weaponized impact upon our human flesh, but everything in all of creation is interconnected. All the ecosystems are very, very vulnerable and very interconnected. Now, of course, small amounts of any toxicity can generally be cleaned and purified by the human body and by various creatures and ecosystems. This is a very, very miraculous aspect of creation. But when we are bombarded in a full spectrum manner, in a holistic manner over time, by various pollutants and toxins, then it becomes difficult to process, to isolate, process, and eliminate the toxins. So I said that the Malhama has been going on, so it's not just in the potential, but also actively. Every single time that a weapon, whether it is chemical, biological, genetic, energetic, microwave, or nuclear, every time that it is tested in a real world scenario outside of very strict, tight, safe laboratory conditions, it's always an act of war and always has been, and a known act of war. Why do I say that? Well, imagine if a nuclear bomb is tested at the ground level, underground, in the atmosphere, in the stratosphere, in the oceans. Everything is very interconnected. Everything. The kelp beds in the ocean currents that carry the water and the microorganisms and the fish and sea mammals, all the marine creatures. All of that If a weapon is tested at, say, the Bikini Atoll, it not only affects the Bikini Atoll, it cannot be isolated. That is literally a worldwide attack on all of humanity and on all creatures in the entire world. It always was. If it takes place underground, it not only impacts the localized vicinity, but it sonically and energetically expands, and then will move through root systems. It will move through water tables and water systems. It will impact, the fungi. It'll impact the bacterium, the algae. It'll impact the micro creatures. It'll impact the minerals in various ways that then are going to be transported to the surface and into the water, that are going to move through the vast seas of soil, because the whole world is alive and in movement constantly. If it is in the land, that it impacts the fresh water through the water table, it impacts the lakes, the streams, the rivers. If it's in the ocean, it impacts all of the seas, and it impacts the lands. It impacts the magma. The vibratics impact the mantle and all of the lava. So that would be a way. So testing is a way to actually impact volcanoes and the thermodynamics of the earth. If it is in the atmosphere, it's going to move through, and all the flying creatures are impacted, whether they are insect, whether they are birds, whether they are mammals, like such as the bats, whether they are, whoever's breathing air. It's going to toxify and pollute the air that we all breathe and depend upon. And it's going to have impacts on, say, the carbon dioxide that the trees and the plants breathe to give us oxygen. It's going to have a negative impact on all the flora and all the fauna immediately, regionally. So it's at the local level, the regional level, and the worldwide level through the air currents. If it's in the stratosphere, it expands even more vastly, and then will drop down in particulates and in waves of energy. So we're imagining that all these are real. Even if you don't believe that the nukes are real, that the atomic weapons are real, this would be true for directed energy weapons. This would be true for any type of weapon that is energetic in any capacity. It would, chemical weapons, the same thing. If it is released at the surface level, at the atmospheric level, at the stratospheric level, at the water level, within water supplies, whether they are saline or fresh water, whether it's in lakes, rivers, or streams, or biologicals, or genetic modificants. If there are any genetic modifications, it impacts the entirety of all ecosystems. So it impacts all flora and fauna, maybe slowly, not all at once, but gradually and over time. And if multiple tests are taking place at the chemical of any of these things, that anything that could be weaponized against any form of life is a weapon against all forms of life. That is why the true ethic, the true prophetic ethic, and the true ethic of humanity, the true universal ethic, is always according to natural law, and is always to minimize and eliminate harm towards self and other in thought, in word, in action. It is always the path of wisdom and compassion. It is always the path of honesty and truth. It is always the path of justice. It is always the path of mercy, compassion, kindness, love. Because we recognize that everything's interconnected. This is literally the Quranic worldview. It is the biblical worldview. It is the prophetic worldview. It is the worldview of all the Dhammic systems, of all the Dharmic systems, of the Taoist systems, all the systems that are called the way. This is the way. But brothers and sisters, it is very important that we recognize that the great slaughter has been taking place since World War II at least. Now, because I mentioned the chemical and biological weapons, this goes all the way back before World War I. And it is always pushed forward most strongly by the nihilists and by the malignant atheists, by those who don't have meaning and whose purpose is suicidal. They hate themselves and they hate humanity and they hate life. So now they're not just suicidal, they're homicidal. They're not just homicidal, they're ecocidal. In the Quran it says, to kill one human, it is as if you have engaged in genocide. All right? And so this goes on all levels for nuclear, atomic, energetic, chemical, biological, genetic. Every single level. So we are in the Malhama. And so I said mushroom cloud because it could be fungi can be weaponized, and can also its spores can be spread through the air and weaponized. Algae can be weaponized. Bacteria can be weaponized. Food can be weaponized. You know, animals can be injected in various ways with weapons that then are eaten. So, because think about it, poisons have always been eaten and drank. So therefore, that means that the animals can be weaponized. That means that all the plant sources can be weaponized and modified to not just have a direct negative impact and cause allergies and destabilizations and toxifications and cause imbalances within the body systems and in the systems of elimination, such as the liver, the urine, the gut, the intestines and stomach, through the skin. But it can also be weaponized in those manners to go into the wastewater in the water supply. Medicines can be weaponized and then be causing problems through the interconnection of the water treatment systems. Then people bathe in toxins. They drink toxins that have not been purified out. And chemicals can be in interaction with one another. You know, anybody who's, you know, like, I'm not from the medical field, and none of my words are medical advice, ever. However, what I would say is that it's very widely known that the doctors will tell you to beware of mixing certain kinds of medicines because they can cause a problem. So this goes for any chemicals. So certain kinds of plants or certain kinds of foods should not be eaten with other types of foods. And should have certain timings, and should only be eaten under certain conditions in certain amounts, or drinks. So that goes for anything. So it's like you could have a toxin. Think about the Batman trilogy, which was actually a brilliant way of thinking about psychology. It's a psychological meditation. It's a meditation on pathologies. It's a meditation on ethical living. And there's the instance where I believe Scarecrow is taking a type of toxin and placing it in the water supply, and then when it combines with the air, then it has a certain interaction. So there could be accumulations within the human body from foods and drinks and air that then when other chemicals are combined with it, it could lead to a certain reaction. You know, that could come through radiation, it could come through food, through drinks, etc. So I want you to meditate on these, contemplate these things, pray about these things, do research on these things, because everything's so interconnected. So I don't believe that we are coming up on the Malhama. I believe we've been in the Malhama the whole time. You are a war baby. You were born in war. Matter of fact, your whole birth process was a part of the Malhama. I'll break that down in another episode. But the whole birthing process is literally Malhama. It is the great slaughter, and is intended to disrupt and destroy the bond between mothers and children. It is intended to destroy family units. It's intended to destroy families and communities. Everything has been weaponized against us. Our medicine, our medical systems, our food systems, the agricultural world, the water supplies, the air, everything in a holistic way. So the answer is holistic. The answer is turning away from wrong views and unhealthy attachments to false views of people, places, things, and ideas, and then to purify the body and purify the mind once we've let go of those unhealthy idolatries and turned toward the truth and surrendered to the truth. This is the prophetic path. This is the way to overcome and to win and to take our world back, inshallah. This is the path of the Imam Mahdi, the path of right guidance. This is the path, guaranteed 100%. I'm convinced of this. So you live in the Malhama, you were born in it, and you have the responsibility to do everything you can to purify yourselves and engage in the greater struggle and carry the black flags of the greater struggle to overcome First, in your own body and mind, and in your own family and your own environment, and then in a decentralized manner to take back territory from the Dajjal, the deceiver. So we'll discuss this more in the near future, inshallah. But until next time, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu.